Hello, this is Dr. Gunn, and I'm your professor for elementary Greek. This will be the second video on the Greek alphabet. Hopefully by now you've had a chance to watch and digest the material from the first video. The first video covered chapters 1 and 2 of Philemon Zachariou's Reading and Pronouncing Biblical Greek. In this video, I want to take a look at chapters 3 and 4 and give a few more details on both the consonants and the vowels of the Greek language. So to begin with, let's get right into chapter 3. As we said in the first video, Greek consonants consist of both voiced and voiceless consonants. When you think about this feature, you can pronounce consonants either by vibrating your voice box or by not vibrating your voice box. To illustrate this, if you'll take your hand and place your thumb on one side of your throat and your forefinger and middle finger on the other side of your throat, kind of like you're squeezing your air drive, you can actually feel your voice box vibrating when you pronounce voiced consonants. So it's kind of an interesting thing to try as you're thinking about the sounds of these. Now take a look at the table that we have at the top of this slide. As you look across the top in the dark brown region, you'll notice that the consonants of Greek are separated into labials, that would be the first 4 columns, dentals, the next 4 columns, and velars, the last 4 columns. As we spoke of in the first video, the labials are those consonants that are pronounced at the lips, either by stopping the breath there or by squeezing the breath or limiting the breath through the area of the lips. And those would be consonants like P, Vita, Mi, Delta, Phi, Psi. These are all labials. I think I said Delta, which should actually be a dental, but P, Vita, Phi, Mi, and Psi. These are all labial consonants which either stop or limit the breath at the lips. As you think about the dentals, they are Delta, Tav, Theta, Ni, Zeta, and Sigma. These all involve either stopping or limiting the breath at or right behind the teeth. The other type of consonants would be the velars, which involve stopping or limiting breath on the palate, at the roof of the mouth, behind the teeth. So you have certain velar consonants like kappa, yama, chi, xi. And we'll talk about some other things as we move through this lecture, as we think about some of the digraphs as well. But if you try pronouncing each of these, you'll notice that some of them are voiced and some are voiceless. So let's come back and think about those labial consonants again. Vita is a labial aspirate that is voiced. So again, if you take your hand and place your thumb on one side of your throat and your forefinger and long middle finger on the other side of your throat, kind of squeezing your trachea a bit, and you make the sound of Vita, which sounds like an English V, 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 you should be able to feel the vibration in your throat. V. Now keeping your fingers there on your throat, notice just below Vita on our table is the letter Phi. Phi. This is voiceless. So if you make the sound of this letter, which is like the English F or PH, when you pronounce that, you should not feel your larynx or your voice box vibrating. So this is the difference between a voiced and a voiceless consonant. Try the labial nasal voiced consonant me, kind of like the English M. Again, with your hand on your throat, feeling for this vibration. If you pronounce the sound of me, you should feel a vibration. For a voiceless labial, try the sibilant letter psi. It's like a PS sound in English. Ps, ps. So if you have your hand alongside your throat and you pronounce that sound, ps, you feel no vibration. Now let's think about the other voiced consonants. Picking up on our table with the dental stop, delta, the. Feel a vibration. Dental aspirate actually is more accurately what delta is. Under the dental stop, you'll notice we have ni, delta. And we will take a look at this. When ni is combined with a delta, it actually makes the sound of the English D. So if you make the sound of the English D, d, once again, that is voiced. The dental nasal is the letter ni, sounding like the English N. And this sound is voiced. N, n. The zeta also is dental, and it is voiced. It is a sibilant, sounds like the English Z. So make the sound of Z, 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 and you should feel a definite vibration in your throat. Those are the dental consonants. If you think about the voiceless dental consonants, think about the voiceless dental stop, tough, sounding like the English T. It's t, 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 with no vibration of the voice box. The theta is a voiceless dental aspirate. It is TH without vibrating the voice box. Th, th, th. And then, of course, the letter sigma is a hissing sound. It's a sibilant. It's a dental sibilant that is voiceless. S, s. Now, if your voice box vibrates, it becomes a zeta. Z, z. So zeta and sigma are both dental sibilants, one voiced, the other voiceless. And then we can look at the velar stops. The velar stop is kappa, and you'll notice that it is voiceless. K, k. For the velar aspirates, you have two letters. The yama is a voiced velar aspirate. It has some breath mixed with it. In other words, it allows the breath to go through, but there's a narrowing of that cavity and a vibration of the voice box. So it is y, 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 kind of like the English letter Y, y, y. Whereas the he makes almost the same form in the oral cavity, but it does not engage the voice box. And so it is. For a velar nasal, the double letters, two yamas together, hold on this. We'll come to this in just a little while in this lecture. But it is basically an NG sound, nga. And for a velar sibilant that is voiceless, we have the letter ksi, like the English letter X, x. So these are voiced and voiceless consonants. And as we're thinking about these, let me also mention some other categories that we can apply to the consonants. There are certain consonants that are referred to as liquids. And the liquid consonants are all voiced. Liquids are not stops. Neither are they quite aspirates. They allow the flow of some breath, but it is squeezed in the oral cavity. And we're thinking primarily of the letters lambda, ro, mi, and ni. Now, two of these, the me and the ni, are nasals. So they're not breathy sounding, but the breath is allowed to flow through the nasal cavity, which squeezes that breath. The lambda and the ro allows the breath to flow through the oral cavity, but it is squeezed either at the dental area, like the lambda, or further back in the velar area, as you have with the ro. But these squeeze the air. Now we also have some nasal consonants, both consonants and consonant sounds. Here we want to talk about some of the combinations. When the letter yama is combined with a second velar consonant, the first yama will actually be pronounced as if it were ng, like ng in the word song, ng, ng. And then it will be followed by the second velar sound, like this. A double yama by itself sounds like ng in the word sing or song, sing, ng, ng. A yama kappa also will sound like ng, ng. Now, if you have a yama coming immediately before a letter he, the first yama will be pronounced ng, and you will still hear the he as an aspirated velar. So it's a ng, ng, like the combination of ng and then the h in the phrase going home. Ng, ng. Just a slight aspiration there. A yama followed by kasi is going to be an ng followed by a ks. It's a nks, nks, as nks in thanks, nks. So these are nasal yama, where the first yama combines with the following velar, and you'll have that ng sound when they're pronounced. Let me throw a couple of Greek words up here on this slide so you can see how they would sound using these nasal yamas. Notice this word. You have epsilon, yama, he, rho, iota, omega. All right, the epsilon is an e sound, a short e, e. The yama kappa is going to give us the ng followed by an h. Rho is going to be an r sound. Iota is going to be that phonetic I, the e sound. And then the omega is o. So put it all together and it sounds like this. Engrio, engrio, which is a Greek word meaning I anoint. Here's another example. This word has sigma, alpha, lambda, pi, iota, gamma, xi. Notice at the very end of this word you have yama, xi. There we have another nasal yama. So the sigma is an S sound, alpha, short A, ah. The lambda is going to give us our L sound, L. The P is a P, P. Then iota is the E. Remember that phonetic I sounds like E. And then we come to our nasal yama, yama, he. Since the he is velar, the yama is going to be pronounced like an NG, and then the kasi is going to be x, x. So this put together sounds like salpinx, salpinx. So this is your nasal yama, where the yama preceding a velar consonant takes on the sound of ng, ng. Now, while we're talking about voiced and voiceless consonants, let me mention that the letter sigma we mentioned earlier was a voiceless consonant. But there is an exception to this rule. When sigma comes immediately before another voiced consonant, then the sigma will become voiced, and it will sound like the English Z. You might remember that we said just a little while ago that zeta is a voiced dental sibilant, while sigma is a voiceless dental sibilant. But what happens is when the sigma comes just before another voiced consonant, that vibration of the voice box attaches itself to the sigma, and the sigma becomes pronounced as if it were a zeta, a voiced dental sibilant. So sigma normally is voiceless, but it becomes voiced when it comes before another voiced consonant, either vita or another yama or delta, lambda, mi, ni, or ro. In this case, it is pronounced like the English Z. Consider the word we have here: epsilon, sigma, mi, epsilon, ni. Now, you might think that this would be pronounced S-men, S-men. But because the mi is voiced, it's going to cause that sigma to be pronounced more like a Z, and will sound like this: esmen, esmen. Again, the voiced quality of the mi is going to become attached to the sigma, make it be pronounced like a Z sound. Notice this next word: alpha, sigma, vita, epsilon, sigma, tau, omicron, sigma. This word actually has two sigmas in it. It's actually three. The first one comes right before a voiced consonant, sigma, vita. 2 letters later, you have a sigma that comes before a voiceless consonant. And at the very end of the word, you have a terminal sigma, which is going to be pronounced like any other sigma, which would be voiceless. But the first sigma in this word is going to take on the sound of Z. So notice, asbestos, asbestos, asbestos. And interestingly, this is the Greek word which in English gives us the word asbestos, asbestos. The English pronunciation will pronounce the S like a normal S, which is voiceless. But in the Greek, this first sigma will become voiced like a Z sound, asbestos. Now this rule applies also even when you have a terminal sigma that comes before the next word beginning with a voiced consonant. Notice here we have 2 words with a separation in between them. The first word, tau, omicron, epsilon, sigma. Then you have another word. The next word starts with a lambda. Lambda happens to be a voiced consonant. So the sigma on the end of the first word will become voiced and pronounced like a Z sound. So what you might think was tus logus actually gets pronounced as tus logus, tus logus. So remember, your sigma coming before a voiced consonant will be pronounced with a Z sound. Here's another example of 2 words, the first one ending in sigma, the second one beginning with the voiced consonant mi. This will be pronounced tismitros, tismitros. Next one, notice again, sigma occurring before a voiced yama. Now, in that second word, if you're not quite familiar with the capital letters yet, that first letter in the second word is a capital yama, capital yama. So this would be Prosgialatus. Prosgialatus. Okay, so that was some information dealing with the consonants in Greek. Let's think for a few moments about the vowels. We talked about the vowels in the first lecture. There is a bit more information I'd like to share with you at this time. First of all, by way of review, there are 5 basic vowel sounds in Greek. You can think about the English I, E, A, O, and U. The I, of course, is the phonetic I. It's the E. So if we look at the sounds, these 5 sounds, they are actually these. E, E, A, O, and U. E, E, A, O, U. Now the letters used to make these sounds are as follows. First of all, the E sound. This is the phonetic I, E. This is probably the most common vowel sound in the Greek language. And there are 6 ways that you can represent this same sound. Like the I in the word ski, it's pronounced E, but these would be the letters iota, eta, and epsilon. And then the vowel combinations, with 2 vowels occurring together, epsilon iota, pronounced E, omicron iota, pronounced E, and epsilon iota, also pronounced E. This is your first basic vowel sound. The second basic vowel sound is the E, the short E, E. So you have 2 ways of representing this in Greek. First, with the letter epsilon, E. Think of the E in the word let. E looks like epsilon, and the E in let is what we call a short E, and that's the sound that epsilon will always make when it's written by itself. You also have the combination digraph. We'll talk about the digraphs in just a few moments. Alpha, iota. When these 2 letters appear together, you do not pronounce alpha and iota separately, as if they were A and E, but together they are pronounced E. And you can think of the word said, S-A-I-D. Notice in the English word you have an A-I, but it's pronounced E. And that's what we have going on with alpha iota. Alpha iota is very much like the A-I in said. Now, when we think of the pure A sound, it's a short A, like the A in the word art. This is the sound of alpha when it's by itself. The O sound is represented by the 2 letters omicron and omega. Omicron and omega are both pronounced exactly the same, like the O in the word or. Now in English, we have both a short O, and a long O. The Greek O sound is kind of halfway between these. It's not quite as short as That is covered by the letter alpha. It's not as long as the O, but it's sort of in between. It's O, like O in the word or. The last vowel sound is covered by the combination of omicron and epsilon occurring together. Now, omicron by itself makes O, epsilon by itself makes E. When you have these 2 occurring together, it's not O-E, it is U, pronounced U. Think of the O-U in the word you. So omicron epsilon looks like the English O-U. And you can always think of this word you and how the OU makes the oo sound. This will always be the pronunciation of omicron epsilon. So these are the basic 5 vowel sounds. Now, in addition to these 5 vowel sounds, we need to think about certain combinations of vowels. We've been talking about some of these combinations, but when two vowels come together to pronounce a single sound, it's called a digraph. Di meaning two and graph meaning written. So two written letters producing a single sound is called a digraph or digraph. And there are certain types of digraphs found in Greek. We're going to look at three different groupings of digraphs. Here, let's consider the first group of digraphs, and we've already looked at some of these, but epsilon iota, omicron iota, and epsilon iota are all producing the single sound of phonetic I, like I in the word ski. So if that's difficult to remember, if you're thinking about epsilon iota, think of an English word like seize, S-E-I-Z-E. The E-I in seize looks a little bit like the epsilon and iota, and it's pronounced like it. So in English, the E-I in seize is pronounced like this phonetic I. Think about the omicron iota combination. The omicron iota digraph is pronounced like the O-I in the word chamois. Chamois now, of course, is actually a French word, but it's been brought into the English language. And here we have O-I in the word chamois, which looks like or reminds us of the Greek omicron iota. And in chamois, the O-I takes on this phonetic I sound. It's pronounced E. This is how omicron iota will always be pronounced in Greek. And then the third of these, the epsilon iota, well, you can think of the English word quiche. In quiche, the UI looks a bit like the Greek epsilon iota, and it's pronounced the same way. In quiche, UI is pronounced with the phonetic I sound, E. Now, another combination here in this first group of vowel digraphs will be alpha iota. And as we said previously, these, when they occur together, are pronounced like E in the word let. Or to help you remember the AI, the alpha iota, think of AI in the word said. And AI looks like alpha iota. And in the word said in English, AI is pronounced E. For omicron epsilon, you can think of the OU in the word you. So this is the first group of vowel digraphs. I want to think about another group of digraphs, and this is a group known as iota subscript. Iota subscript. Take a look at these three digraphs. You have an alpha, an eta, and an omega, but underneath each of these vowels is written a tiny, tiny iota. Now, iota is already the smallest letter of the Greek alphabet, but when it's written as one of these subscripts, it's even smaller than normal, written right underneath these vowels. The tiny iota written underneath these vowels is called iota subscript, and it is not pronounced. So the alpha with iota subscript is pronounced exactly the same as alpha without the subscript. Eta with the subscript, pronounced exactly the same as an eta without the subscript, E. And omega with the subscript is pronounced exactly the same as omega without the subscript, O. So you might be wondering at this point, why even bother with the iota subscript if you don't pronounce it? Well, the answer to that question is simply this. While the iota subscript is not pronounced, its presence in a word can affect the meaning of a word. So when it is there, you must notice it, even though you don't pronounce it. Kind of like some of the silent letters we have in English. They are an important part of the word for determining their meaning, even though we don't pronounce them. So let me give you some examples. You can have the word ora, omega, rho, alpha. This is the equivalent of the English word hour, 60 minutes in an hour, ora in Greek. Normally it is written without the subscript, but when it is written with a subscript underneath the alpha, ora, it means at the hour. So it adds a certain linguistic element to the word when the iota subscript is there. Or if we take a look at this next example, eta sigma, eta sigma, with a smooth breathing and a circumflex accent. We'll talk about the accents in the next video. But these two letters pronounced together are is, and would be translated into English, you were. But notice to the right, you have also is, only there is an iota subscript with the letter eta. And when written with the iota subscript, it means that you may be. So you were versus that you may be. The iota subscript makes a big difference in the meaning. One more example. Notice omega by itself is like an exclamation. Oh, with an exclamation mark. But omega with an iota subscript can mean to whom, or for whom, or in whom, depending on the context. Those are all legitimate ways of translating it, and it has an entirely different meaning when written with the iota subscript. So iota subscript is, again, one of these digraphs. It's a vowel and the letter iota written together, and the iota is simply not pronounced, but it does have importance for the meaning of the word. Now there's a third group of digraphs we must talk about, talking about these vowel digraphs, and this involves the letter epsilon. Now epsilon normally makes the phonetic I sound, E, E. But in certain combinations with other letters, it will be pronounced either like the vita or like the phi. So let's take a look at these examples. One epsilon is written before vowels and voiced consonants. Epsilon becomes voiced vita, pronouncing like the letter V. When it comes before voiceless consonants and at the end of a word, epsilon becomes voiceless phi. So the epsilon can be pronounced either like a V or a F. And here's how it works. Alpha epsilon will be pronounced of, like in bravo. That's if it comes before a voiced consonant. If it comes before a voiceless consonant, it will be pronounced like af, like in the word pilaf. So alpha epsilon will be either of or af. Epsilon epsilon will be pronounced either ev or f. Ev coming before a voiced consonant, f coming before a voiceless consonant. And then eta followed by epsilon will be pronounced ev or if. Ev or if. So ev, like in the word evil, eve, or ef, like it in EEF in beef. So eta, epsilon, eve, or ef. Now, related to these digraphs is a feature in Greek known as diaresis. Diaresis comes from the Greek word diaresis, which means division. So almost the opposite of a digraph. In a digraph, you have two letters written together pronouncing a single sound. With diaresis, you have two vowels coming together pronouncing two separate sounds. When you see this symbol, two dots alongside of each other, written over the top of the second of two vowels, that means those two vowels are to be pronounced separately. You'll find it used either above iota or epsilon when these follow another vowel. And when the diaresis is written, then the two vowels are to be pronounced separately rather than as a digraph. So notice Omicron iota is normally pronounced like the I in ski. It is a digraph. But if you place the diaresis symbol over the iota, then the Omicron is pronounced O and the iota pronounced E, like O-I in the word oil. Oil is O-E-L, oil. And both of those vowels are being pronounced separately. That's how you would pronounce these two vowels when diaresis is present. If you have omega iota, normally this is again pronounced like your phonetic I, E, E. But if you have diaresis written over the iota, then omega iota is pronounced again like O-I in oil, O-E, oi. What about alpha iota? Well, as a digraph, alpha iota is pronounced like the short E sound, like AI in said, eh. But put a diaresis over the iota, and that makes a big difference. Now the two vowels are pronounced separately, plus E, E, like AI in the word aisle. In aisle, the AI are both pronounced, A-E-L, aisle. For alpha epsilon, as we said, this is one of the digraphs where the epsilon becomes pronounced like a V or an F. Alpha epsilon as a digraph is pronounced of or af. But when diaresis is found over the epsilon, then the epsilon retains its normal sound as a phonetic E, phonetic I sound, E. So E, like AI and aisle, I-E, I-E. Now, just before we bring this video to a conclusion, I want to talk about the quality of vowels as it relates to accents. We're going to talk about the accents in the following video, but you first have to realize that vowels in Greek are considered either long or short. And you'll need to remember which ones are long, which ones are short, because this affects the way words are accented. Vowels are considered either long or short. Now, this doesn't have any effect on how they're pronounced, but it does determine where an accent may fall on a word or how a word might be spelled. So we will look at this when we consider the rules for accent in Chapter 5. Here are the rules. Eta and omega are always considered long. So think of eta and omega as long vowels. Epsilon and omicron are always considered short. So no matter where they are in a word, epsilon and omicron are always short. Now the remaining vowels, alpha, iota, and epsilon, may be either long or short. Now you may be wondering, how do I know? Well, as you learn words and you hear where the accent falls, you'll learn whether the alpha is long or short in that word, or whether the iota is long or short in that word, or whether the epsilon is long or short in that word. And that will come as you begin to pick up vocabulary and see these accents written in various words. Now, normally all digraphs are considered long. There are two exceptions to this word. Alpha iota and omicron iota, when they come at the end of a word, are considered short. Otherwise, all digraphs, including alpha iota and omicron iota, when they're not at the end of a word, are considered long. And this will help us to understand the rules for accent in the next chapter.